Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn. Today we have a whole bunch of leaked spoilers from Modern Horizons 3. We had a leak last week with Planeswalkers. Now we have a whole bunch of other mythic rares, and even a couple of minor rarities thrown in as well. So we're gonna get right to it. We're not gonna delay any longer. We're gonna get right into the cards. But really quick before we do that, make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. You guys who are hitting the like button on all of my videos are the reason that my videos are getting out to everybody and the reason that my channel's growing so fast. So without you guys hitting that like button, I don't think we'd be there. So to those of you who already do it, thank you so much. If you're not doing it, please just do it. It helps so much. You have no idea. Also, if you're new, subscribe so you never miss a video. We got tons of spoiler content coming, tons of deck tech uploads from Thunder Junction. Let's do it. Subscribe. I'll see you there. Let's move on to the cards, shall we? We're going to start here with just a common, but it gives us a good idea of what to expect for the draft environment in Modern Horizons 3. This is Skura Sentry, 1 black and 3 for a 2/3 human knight rogue with menace. And whenever Skura Sentry enters the battlefield or attacks, it connives. So, kind of interesting here, sort of like a mini Rafine with a little bit of evasion. It's not flying, but it does have menace. It's worth noting it's human, it's a knight, and it's a rogue, so it has all sorts of tribal implications. Or is it kindred now? Kindred implications? Whatever the case may be. You can use it in human tribal, knight tribal, rogue tribal. You can use it with things that care about outlaws from Thunder Junction. Lots of really cool stuff going on here, especially considering it's just a common, right? I think this will be pretty cool, and I'm hoping that each of these creature types has some kind of an archetype within Limited that it will work well in, but a mini Rafine is always welcome. Moving on, we've got Meltdown. This is a reprint, but I'm happy to see it. 1 red and X for a sorcery. Destroy each artifact with mana value X or less. Let's do the thing, right? Sick of treasure tokens, sick of blood tokens, sick of clue tokens, sick of token tokens. Meltdown's going to take care of them all. This could be a key sideboard card in Limited, so we'll have to see when we see what the rest of the set is. But yeah, this could be important. Next up, we've got Archway of Innovation, which I'm pretty sure is a reprint. Let me know in the comments below if it is or not, if I'm wrong about that. But this is a land. Taps for 1 blue, and when it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped unless you control an island, so it's obviously going to work best in mono blue. But you can also pay 1 blue, tap it, and the next spell you cast this turn has Improvise. So, nice little bit of free value there built into your mana base, being able to, you know, give any spell Improvise once a turn. I think it could be powerful in the right deck. At the very least, it's going to be really good in Limited. But, is there a certain deck we could use this in? Let me know in the comments. We're going to move on. Brea, Ethereum Shaper. Now, this is another reprint. 4 mana, 1 red, 1 black, 1 blue, 1 white for a 4/4 legendary artifact creature human. When Brea, Ethereum Shaper enters the battlefield, you create 2 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. And then you can pay 2 and sacrifice 2 artifacts, choose one of the following abilities. Either deal 3 damage to a player or planeswalker, target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn, or you gain 5 life. So obviously, if you can go super wide with artifacts, this is very powerful. Being able to just sack 2, pay 2, and get any one of these abilities, depending on what's best for this situation, it's going to be really good. I'm not 100% sure if this sees any new improvements through what's coming in Modern Horizons 3, the kind of decks that Brea's always been in, or if maybe we see a new kind of deck pop up with Brea at the core, but solid card, always been really cool, glad to see her back. Moving on, we have Flare of Denial, 2 blue and 1 for an instant. You may sacrifice a non-token blue creature rather than pay this spell's mana cost, and then you counter target spell. So it's Force of Will at home. You get a free counter spell, but instead of having to exile things from your hand, you have to have a non-token creature to sacrifice, which is a little bit harder, but it's not impossible. It's easier than you'd think. So being able to have free counter spells, if you just have a little bit of board presence that you don't mind losing, is actually super powerful, I think. And then just being able to play it for 3 mana as a normal counterspell. And not being stuck, you know, having to use it as a free counterspell. Force of Will's 5 mana. I believe it's 5. It might be 6. To hard cast it if you're not getting the free mode, right? So this is much more reasonable as a sometimes you want to use it for free, sometimes you want to hard cast it, which I think makes the card a lot more playable than it looks like on the surface. But I mean, any potential free counterspell is going to be busted, right? So is this busted? Let me know in the comments. Next up, we've got Harbinger of the Seas. Speaking of busted, this is a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard for 2 blue and 1. All non-basic lands are islands. Yes, this is basically Blood Moon, but on a body and for islands instead of mountains. This is disgusting. This shuts down anything that's not monocolor, that's relying on non-basic lands. And what's cool about this too is it can hit decks more effectively that maybe Blood Moon couldn't. If you have multicolor decks that are using a lot of non-basic lands, but they're tilted in the direction of red, Harbinger of the Seas is actually shutting those decks down way better than, you know, Blood Moon ever could, because making sure their mana sources are islands rather than mountains is a hell of a thing. But then also having this 2/2 body, it's kind of a risk-reward scenario. It's a double-edged sword. You do have a body built into your Blood Moon that can swing every turn and eventually, you know, maybe kill your opponent, maybe be a win condition, but it also is a little bit more vulnerable to removal. Your opponent has the ability to tap their mana in response to this coming into play, to keep their colored mana in their pool, and then use it for instant speed removal to immediately deal with it. So you do have to be careful with how you play it, but the card is just so powerful that I think that's fine. I think that just kind of balances it and makes it not completely busted, but the card is super powerful. Do you think it's going to take over where Blood Moon always used to reign? Let me know in the comments. I'm not sure. I don't know. Part of me thinks it might be better than Blood Moon. Next up, we have Necro Dominance. Necropotence, one of my oldest favorite cards. This is a new take on it. 3 black mana for a legendary enchantment. When it's on the battlefield, you skip your draw step. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay any amount of life. If you do, you draw that many cards. But your maximum hand size is 5, and if a card or token will be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So, nice little bit of sort of balance built in here where it's Necropotence, but you can't keep as many cards in your hand as you used to be able to keep in your hand with Necropotence, right? And it's legendary. So it's a little bit trickier if you know, if you have multiple copies. You know, you can't slam multiple copies. Not that I think you'd really want a second copy in play anyway, but that's besides the point. That's besides the point. But I mean, just getting a new Necropotence is kind of crazy in and of itself. Granted, it has this new downside, but I mean, I still think it's nuts. Am I wrong? I don't know. I keep questioning whether I should think this is nuts or not, but I don't know. I think it's nuts. A new Necropotence seems crazy to me. I don't know. I would really like you guys' opinions, because it's Necropotence. Except it's not Necropotence. Moving on, we have Null Drifter. Apologize for the quality here. I did my best in touching up all of the cards. This one was definitely the hardest, but we did the best we could do. This is 7 mana for a 4/4 Eldrazi Elemental with flying. It is colorless. When you cast this spell, you get to draw 2 cards. And it has Annihilator 1, so whenever it attacks, defending player has to sacrifice a permanent. Notice it doesn't say non-land permanent or anything like that. That's how Annihilator rolls. Any permanent. And then you can evoke it for 1 blue and 2. So it's like a Muldrifter combined with an Eldrazi, right? I guess that makes sense, being that it's called Null Drifter. But this is really cool because earlier in the game, if you just need the card draw, you can have your 3 mana draw 2 cards spell, right? But if you have the mana, you can get a 4/4 flying Annihilator 1 body on top of drawing the 2 cards just by paying the full 7. And I think either mode here is super useful, and I think having the ability to do either or makes it useful in the same way charms are, where you get that versatility, you get to choose whatever's best for the moment. So I think this card's really, really cool. I don't know if it's good enough to see play. I hope it is, because I like it so much. But if you could think of somewhere specific where this would slot in, the kind of deck that could use this, definitely let me know in a comment, because I'm scratching my head trying to figure it out, and it's one of the most fun cards I've seen all day, so I really want to make it work. Next up, we have Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor. Speaking of fun cards, this is a 3/4 legendary Fox Advisor with lifelink for 2 white and 1. Enchantment spells you cast have affinity for auras. That's right, affinity is back. This time it's for auras. So all of your enchantments, not just auras, all of your enchantments are going to cost 1 less for every aura you control on the battlefield, which can get kind of crazy. And then whenever you cast an aura spell that targets a modified permanent you control, draw a card. Now, a modified permanent is anything that has a counter on it, or has an equipment on it, or has an aura on it, which is where this is going to be the most useful, because as you're enchanting your own creatures with your auras, they become modified. And then the more things you play, the more cards you draw, just like a normal Enchantress deck is looking to do, except you also have this kind of beefier life-linking body that can hold off aggro a lot better. And then you also have this weird top end here where once you play enough auras, you could play some big bomby enchantment at the top for like super cheap, maybe just 1 or 2 mana, and like take over the game with some kind of crazy power play. I'm not 100% sure what enchantment we'd want to play with that, but there has to be some kind of crazy bomb enchantments that we can just pepper into a deck that's otherwise just a normal kind of Enchantress build that would just completely take over the game if we can just play them a little bit later on while Pearlier's on the field with enough auras. So, I don't know, if you have any ideas about a big bomby enchantment that you think might work super well in something like this, let me know, because that's another thing. You'll notice a trend here. There's a lot of scratching my head being like, there's so much potential in these cards, but what do we actually do with it, right? What do we actually do with it? So, if you have an idea, let me know in the comment, because there's got to be something crazy we could do. Next up, we have Shil Gengar, Sire of Famine. This card is super cool. 6/6 legendary Elder Demon with flying for 2 black and 3. You can sacrifice any other creature at any time at instant speed as an activated ability to create a blood token. But if you sacrificed an angel this way, you instead create a number of blood tokens equal to its toughness, so not just 1. And then you can also pay 3 mana with 3 Orzhov hybrid mana, rather. So this could be mono black, mono white, or some combination. Sacrifice 6 blood tokens. Return each creature from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Those creatures are vampires in addition to their other types. I don't know what direction this card wants to go. Part of me is thinking like Angel Tribal would be super rad with this, because you're always going to have very effective things to sacrifice and create a bunch of blood tokens, and then later on you can just get everything back, right? But maybe you want to play this in Vampire Tribal. Everything comes back as vampires, and maybe you can get some vampire payoffs. I don't know. I think Angel Tribal might be the way to go. I think just being able to hold this up as a potential activated ability, if your opponent's trying to use removal on creatures, you can just sack them in response, get your blood tokens, and then when they try to kill Shil Gengar, you can sacrifice it, or you can rather activate its ability before it dies and sack your blood tokens to get everything that went to the battlefield back. So, some really cool ways you can utilize this in response to, you know, removal and stuff like that, but as far as what does it build into, it's another one of those head scratchers, because I think it could go a couple different ways. Either way, it's really powerful. Like, do we try to just take advantage of having a ton of blood tokens with things that want a go wide artifact board? Do we try to take advantage of Angel Tribal for making a whole bunch of blood tokens? Or do we just use this in a deck that's making blood tokens with other cards to bring back a whole bunch of stuff from the graveyard and have it be one of those cheaper recursive reanimate your whole graveyard kind of scenarios? I'm not sure. It could go any way, but the card is sick, and I kind of love it. It's an Elder Demon. Let's go. Next up, we have Thief of Existence. This is an interesting one. This is a 3/4 𝐿𝑒𝑑𝑟𝑎�𝑖 with Devoid, so it has no color, regardless of what its mana cost is. Its mana cost is 1 green, 1 actual colorless Hedron, and 1. And that Hedron, you have to actually use colorless mana to pay for it. It can't be mana of any color, which is really, really interesting. But then it's Devoid, so even though you pay the green to play this, it has to you have to have green mana in your deck to pay for this. It's not a green card. It doesn't count as a green card. So it's effective against things that have protection from green, because it won't protect from this because of the Devoid, which is really, really cool. And what it does is when you cast this spell, you exile up to 1 target non-creature, non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value 4 or less. And if you do, Thief of Existence gains when this creature leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. A couple of things about this card that are easily overlooked that are really, really important in trying to evaluate how good it is. The first thing is, in a multiplayer mode, multiplayer like Commander, say, multiplayer format, when this leaves the battlefield, you can make any opponent draw a card. So it's actually a little bit better in that kind of scenario, because you can have like the player that you're scared of the least, or the player that you're kind of teaming up with in the moment, draw the card, and not the the player you're the most worried about, which is kind of cool. But also that ability to exile a non-land, non-creature permanent with mana value 4 or less, they don't get it back when this leaves the battlefield, which normally they would get something back. And it's on cast. That's the best part about this card. The ability does not trigger when it enters the battlefield. It triggers when you cast this spell, which means you can't technically counter the Thief of Existence and not lose your thing. Like, it's an ability that gets triggered when this is cast, regardless of whether Thief of Existence ever resolves or not. So it's almost like an uncounterable removal for the One Ring, or that's probably the best way it's used, but any number of other really important targets, maybe the Karn Planeswalker that everyone's afraid of. So really, really cool card. Really interesting. So I'm excited to see if this does anything. I hope at the very least it ends up in sideboards to deal with the One Ring. I think the card is super cool design-wise. Next up, we have Volatile Storm Drake, 1 blue and 1 for a 3/2 Drake with flying, and it has hexproof from activated and triggered abilities, which is important because that means it's a lot harder for your opponent to interact with this guy while you're in the middle of doing the thing he's trying to do. And the thing he's trying to do is, when he enters the battlefield, you exchange control of Volatile Storm Drake and target creature an opponent controls. And if you do, you get 4 energy, and then you sacrifice the creature you stole unless you pay an amount of energy equal to its mana value. So there's so many different ways you can use this. So many different ways. First of all, even if it's something that's much, much bigger and you don't have enough energy to pay for the thing to keep it, you can still use this to get rid of a very bomby threat. A big 7, 8, 9 mana spell, a creature that your opponent has that you just can't leave on the battlefield. Even though you don't get to keep it and steal it, you could still take it and then just sacrifice it, and it's still off the board. They just have a 3/2 flyer, and you get 4 energy that you can keep. So if you're in a deck that can utilize energy in other ways, there's some upside to that as well. But you can also just, pay the energy and steal anything up to a 4-drop. You can steal a Sheoldred with this and just give them the Storm Drake, and that way it's a lot like a Gilded Drake. Although I think this is a little bit better than a Gilded Drake just because it has such versatility in different ways that you can use it, which I think is really cool. You could steal something really big with the first one you cast and not spend your energy and save it, and then you could cast a second one and get another 4 energy and then have 8 energy, and this time target something big but be able to keep it because now you have 8 energy to spend. And the last thing you can do with this that makes it really, really awesome is you can bounce it, right? You can exchange it for their best thing, and then after you have their best thing and they have the Storm Drake, you can use any kind of bounce spell on the Storm Drake, return it to its owner's hand, it comes back to your hand, and then you can recast it and steal something else. And no matter what, you keep the thing that you took from them. So I do think this is a pretty powerful card that can be used in a lot of different versatile ways, and I really, really like it. That's not to mention just, you know, if you're in an energy deck that wants energy and is able to generate energy with other cards as well before casting the Storm Drake, it gets even better. So, I don't know. What do you want to use this in? Let me know in the comments, because there's just so much potential. There's just so much potential. Next up, we have Echoes of Eternity, one of the craziest cards we saw today. This is 3 colorless plus 3 colorless Heatran mana, which means at least 3 of the mana actually has to be paid with colorless mana, for a Kindred Enchantment Eldrazi. So this actually counts as an Eldrazi creature type, even though it's an enchantment, which is kind of crazy. It's similar to the old tribal mechanic, but they've renamed it Kindred here, which I kind of have mixed feelings about, but that's for another day. If a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control, or another colorless permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Also, whenever you cast a colorless spell, copy it, you may choose new targets for the copy. This just seems nuts. You get this onto the battlefield. Maybe you can use some way of cheating an enchantment onto the battlefield, maybe bringing it back from the graveyard, maybe you can get it out easier. But doubling every single colorless spell you play is nuts in and of itself. But if those colorless spells also have triggered abilities, you could get 2 copies of a spell you cast, and then each of those copies could get their, like, enters the battlefield trigger or whatever trigger they're getting, and get an additional trigger. So theoretically, if you had the right colorless spell, you could cast 1 spell and end up getting 4 triggers off of it, which seems completely crazy. Now, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but if you can think of any colorless ETB abilities, actually, Thief of Existence, because it has the Void. This is a good example. If you play Thief of Existence while this card is on the battlefield, you will get 2 Thief of Existences. Well, it's a cast trigger, right? I'm not sure how that lines up. But regardless, if you can think of a cool colorless spell that, you know, gets some kind of triggers upon resolution, so that we could get double spells and then double triggers off each of those spells and just get even more value off Echoes of Eternity, let me know in the comments, because there's got to be something out there, right? There's got to be something out there that can just completely and utterly break this. But even if you just use it fairly, I don't know, card seems kind of busted. Just seems busted. And it seems super cool thematically, so I'm all for it. Next up, we have Tarmo Nest. Speaking of super cool thematically, this is 1 green and 2 for a Kindred Enchantment Lurgoyf Aura. That is a mouthful. So this counts as a Lurgoyf, which is kind of crazy. It enchants a land, and that land can pay 1 green and 1 and tap to create a Tarmogoyf token. Now what's cool about that is the Tarmogoyf token itself actually has a mana cost, right? It is a Lurgoyf creature for 1 green and 1, with a 1 green and 1 mana cost, with Tarmogoyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number plus 1. So, I kind of have a conspiracy theory here. We saw a Bloomburrow leak not too long ago with a set of tokens that are coming for that set. We didn't see any actual cards, but we saw some tokens, and the tokens specified that they had a mana cost attached to the token, and this is the first time we've seen anything like that, really. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm pretty sure, at least in any significant way, but then we're seeing it here as well, where the Lurgoyf that this makes has a mana cost. So if I was a betting man, I would say in Bloomburrow we're gonna see some kind of mechanic that cares about the casting cost of a token somehow. You know, the casting cost of a token tied into a new mechanic that we're going to see in that set. And if I was to be a doubly betting man, I would think it has something to do with rabbits. Because rabbits like to mate like rabbits. That is a famous saying. And they procreate and they spread. And I just have a feeling that there's something there. But I don't know. We're going to have to wait for Bloomburrow to see. But this card This card is gross. Just make a Lurgoyf every turn. Like, one Tarmogoyf was bad enough. Having a Tarmogoyf every turn just seems bananas to me. And I don't know what else to say about this card. Is this as crazy as it seems? Because it seems really crazy. Granted, it's just a commander card, but I mean, the whole set is only legal in older formats anyway, so I don't even think that really impacts very much, right? I don't know. I just think the card's bonkers. But we're going to move on to our last card of the day. Nether Goyf. Are they giving us enough Goyfs or not? This is 1 black for a Lurgoyf with star power and 1+ star toughness. His power is equal to the number of card types among cards in just your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. So it's kind of like a Tarmogoyf, except it's cheaper and it only cares about your graveyard, which is sort of interesting. I think it might be a little bit better because 1 mana is 1 mana, and then it also has the ability to escape, which is another huge upside over Tarmogoyf. 1 black and 2, exile any number of other cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. You're already going to be wanting to fill up your graveyard if you're using Goyfs in your deck, so it's pretty easy to have some extra stuff to maybe chip away to escape. It's also worth noting that it says any number of cards with a total of 4 or more card types among them. So the best possible scenario here is you could have an artifact land and an enchantment creature, and you could just exile just those 2 cards and get Nethergoyf back from the graveyard with its escape ability. So I don't know if that setup is too cute to actually try and do, and if this will just be better in a just good deck is good style deck. Or maybe if that fact of just using that ability to only have to exile 2 cards is maybe good enough that it's worth building around. I'm not sure. But the fact that the potential's there to do something crazy like that is pretty wild, in my opinion. I just think this is nuts. I think it's nuts that we're getting all these new Tarmogoyf variants, and they share a kindred type, and these cards are just busted. I'm mostly a standard player most of the time, but I mean, even I have to admit that these cards are looking kind of insane and super fun, and they are coming to Arena. So I'm really, really excited to, at the very least, draft with them, and then just see what kind of shenanigans we can get up to when we're streaming live over on Twitch. Speaking of that, I stream live Monday through Friday, twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn, because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. So check me out. That's going to do it for this video. If you found any value in this video, please give it a like. It does help the video get out to so many more people, and I really, really need the help. And also, if you're new, subscribe so you never miss any of my uploads. Got tons of spoiler content coming, tons of Outlaws of Thunder Junction deck techs being uploaded, really, really interesting, unique brews that I don't think people are thinking of that are, I think, pretty competitive with the standard meta right now. So if you're interested in any of that, definitely subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the future. Till then, always make them scoop. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.